Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our coverage of commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, looking at what's shaping up to be a stunning sunrise as United Launch Alliance prepares to launch its Atlas V rocket. I'm joined this morning by Stephen Young, who is pulling double duty, managing our graphics as well as the cameras for today's launch. At the center of your screen, you're taking a look over at Space Launch Complex 41, otherwise known as Slick 41. As mentioned, ULA is getting ready to launch its second mission of the year, and its first using its Atlas V rocket. We're at T-minus 1 hour, 59 minutes, 23 seconds and counting, and fueling is underway at this point. About 50% of the Centaur's upper stage liquid oxygen tank has already been filled. You can see some venting coming from that part of the rocket. At the center of your screen, you see the support tower to the left of the rocket. See a little bit of that LOX venting, those wispy vapors coming off of the Centaur upper stage just below the payload fairings there on the Atlas V rocket. That liquid oxygen quite chilled. It's about minus 298 degrees Fahrenheit. That LOX tank will have 4,150 gallons of liquid oxygen by the time all is said and done with fuel loading. Point of note, the RP-1, or the rocket-grade kerosene, is already on board the Atlas's first stage, about 25,000 gallons. It was previously loaded during the wet dress rehearsal, where they tank the rocket and go through the step procedure in preparation for launch. That happened in early August, setting the stage for the launch we now see ULA preparing for this morning. Originally, for those who have been tracking this mission, which goes by a couple names, it's NROL 107, otherwise known as Silentbarker. This mission was intended to launch back on August 29th, a Tuesday morning. However, as many of you will likely recall, that was also the week that we had Hurricane Idalia that was barreling towards Florida. And so because it would have taken ULA about 24 hours to remove all the propellant on a fully tanked Atlas V rocket, had they not been able to launch for whatever reason Tuesday morning, and they needed to detank the rocket, move it back to the safety of the VIF, the vertical integration facility, which you can see there on the horizon. It's the tall building on the right-hand side of your screen, just sticking up above the tree line. That is where ULA stacks its Atlas vehicle, as well as the upcoming Vulcan rocket. It would take about 24 hours to, again, detank, roll it back to the safety of that to protect itself from the hurricane. And so ULA decided to stand down from that August 29th launch attempt, put the rocket back in the safety away from the hurricane, and look toward a launch attempt originally yesterday morning. However, before fueling began, ULA did encounter a technical issue that it seems to have resolved at this point. So they stood down from launch to take a look at that yesterday. And now all things are proceeding well so far in the fueling process. T-minus 1 hour, 55 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. T-minus 1 hour, 55 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Liquid oxygen now flowing onto the Atlas V's first stage. It'll contain about 48,800 gallons of the oxidizer to be able to power the main engine. Point of historical reference, as ULA has noted, this is the 108th flight from this particular launch site, Space Launch Complex 41 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. ULA took over the pad to prepare for Atlas flights back in 1999. Today's mission will be the 81st Atlas V rocket that will launch from here. Talk a lot more about the rocket coming up, but just a brief overview. This is designation 551, Atlas V 551. That means there are 5 solid rocket boosters on the first stage of the Atlas V. They're using their long payload fairings. So the biggest fairings, the most solid rocket boosters supporting this mission. It is the Atlas V with the most oomph. There are nicknames that they give all their configurations, which ULA's present CEO, Tori Bruno, likes to talk about. This one is nicknamed Bruiser. Now T-minus 1 hour, 53 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Just before we came on live with you for commentary, ULA was in a planned 30-minute hold as it assessed things before they got into the full fuel propellant loading, which is, as we mentioned, now currently underway. There is another planned 30-minute hold that will come up at T-minus 4 minutes, which is why if you take a look at the right-hand side of your screen at the top right-hand corner, our countdown clock, you see L minus 1 hour, 52 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. That's to compensate for the 30-minute hold, which again will come at T-minus 4 minutes. Liftoff remains on target for launch at 8:47 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, 12:47 UTC. Weather also looking good for an on-time launch this morning. 45th Weather Squadron had pegged the liftoff go weather probability at 85% in their most recent briefing. This morning, ULA updating that from their most recent weather brief to 90% go weather. So ideal conditions for the first Atlas rocket liftoff in this calendar year. Last Atlas launch we had was 10 months ago to the day. This mission is supporting the National Reconnaissance Office. As you mentioned, one of the names of this mission is NROL 107, standing for National Reconnaissance Office Launch 107. This is the 18th and final time that an Atlas rocket will launch a mission for the NRO before ULA retires the rocket and turns over to the Vulcan Centaur rocket, getting ready to make its debut no earlier than the fourth quarter of this year on its first certification mission. ULA has to launch the Vulcan rocket twice before it's able to start launching its contracted missions for national security objectives. So the first national security launch expected in 2024 following the second certification mission. That first one I mentioned coming up in Q4 of this year is going to be a lunar-bound mission, sending up Astrobotic's Peregrine lander, as well as a memorial flight for Celestis, nicknamed Enterprise, of note because the remains of Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, are going to be flying aboard that memorial flight, as well as some of the other folks, the creative forces behind the original Star Trek series. So, of course, we just had Star Trek Day coming into this weekend. So that Celestis flight, certainly one that they're looking forward to, as well as ULA in supporting that mission. As I'm sure all of you have been well aware of, this has been a busy year for moon-bound missions, as we had iSpace, Japanese company, try to send its Hakuto R lander to the moon. Roscosmos also launched its Luna 25 mission. Both of those, unfortunately, had crash landings and failed their objective for a soft touchdown. India has been the only country to successfully reach the moon for a touchdown this year with its Chandrayaan-3 mission. Its lander currently in sleep mode right now, as it is lunar night from its perspective. So teams are hoping it'll be able to wake up following that, although it has completed its primary mission objectives. But they're hoping they might be able to get a little more life out of it once the sun returns to that part of the moon coming up later this month. And of course, recently, the Slim lunar lander launched aboard another rocket from Japan. That happening just earlier this month, and will attempt for its own soft touchdown on the moon coming up later this year. And as mentioned, we also have the Peregrine lander launching aboard Vulcan's first flight. One more to talk about. There's also Intuitive Machines IM-1 lunar lander that's going to be heading up on board a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. So the moon is the hot ticket in town these days. Now L-minus 1 hour, 47 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. At this point, the Centaur upper stage liquid oxygen tank now topping off to its flight level. As far as the progress on fueling the first stage, now at about 30%, fully loaded for flight. Now L-minus 1 hour, 46 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. You see our propellant load status graphic there on the left-hand side of your screen. It'll help us keep track visually of the fueling process so far. As we were just discussing, locks on the Centaur upper stage now fully fueled in their top-off mode. They have not started the process of loading the liquid hydrogen onto the Centaur upper stage at this time, but the fuel lines are currently being chilled in preparation for that. Looking at the Atlas booster, as I mentioned, RP1 load is complete. That was complete before we got into today, since during the wet dress rehearsal last month, early last month in August, They already loaded that, and so it is still remaining on the rocket as it stands now. And as you see there at the bottom, liquid oxygen now 30% full on the Atlas's first stage tank.
LC, PNE2.
Go.
Now L minus 1 hour, 43 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. The launch director for today's mission is ULA's Paul Aragon. This is his 5th mission as a ULA launch director, having previously been in that position for missions USSF, or United States Space Force 7, an asteroid-bound mission by the name of Lucy, as well as the JPSSS-2. His first mission was back in 2019 as the launch director for a Delta IV mission, that being the GPS-3, known as Magellan. L minus 1 hour, 41 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. See some of the wildlife starting to wake up, as see some birds flying in the middle of their shot here. A little more than 30% of the liquid oxygen is now aboard the Atlas booster stage. It'll contain about 48,800 gallons of the super cold oxidizer for this mission. Got another update. L minus 1 hour, 40 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. Locks on the Atlas first stage now increased to 50% loaded. And we've got a nice sunrise on the horizon there. Fortunately, we've got a layer of clouds between us and the sun, so the Atlas rocket is not completely blown out by the rising sun here on Florida's Space Coast. Gorgeous morning for liftoff, though. Coming up in 1 hour, 39 minutes, 53 seconds, and counting. As things are proceeding now, L-1 hour, 39 minutes, 18 seconds, and counting. If you're enjoying our coverage this morning and like to help support it, an excellent way to do that is free and simple. If you just hit the like button on this video, click subscribe, ring the bell so you get notified when our new videos are posted, as well as these live streams begin. And if you can share the stream, that would also be enormously helpful in more people finding our coverage of this Atlas mission this morning. Big part of our coverage also comes from our YouTube channel members, so thank you to folks like Don Coy and Matthew Birdwell, who recently became channel members. So thank you so much to the both of you, and for our other channel members who help support this coverage. If you'd like to help in another way, I'd love it if you consider making a donation through our YouTube Super Chat feature. We'd love to bring in our live chat audience into these missions, and YouTube Super Chats are a great way to do that and to support us as well. Also of note, our members get access to our special member-only videos, as well as discounts to our online shop. Also get the opportunity for 4K views of launches from the Space Coast as well. Now T-1 hour, 35 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. the chill down, the Centaur engine, the RL-10 has begun. Teams are using liquid nitrogen to cool the engine pumps, bring them to the correct temperatures ahead of flight. Now at L minus 1 hour, 34 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Another way to think of that is T minus 1 hour, 4 minutes, 22 seconds and counting, since T minus 4 minutes, there will be the second 30-minute planned hold that will occur. So just a heads up for that. That's coming up later on in the count. Again, weather cooperating very well for this mission with a liftoff time of 8:47 a.m. Eastern. As the sun starts to rise on Florida Space Coast. And we hear the call out that the Centaur chill down sequence is now officially underway. Now L minus 1 hour, 33 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. Now L minus 1 hour, 32 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. Liquid oxygen on the Atlas first stage now stands at 70% as fueling continues for the Silentbarker mission, also known as NROL 107. As we continue the count, do have a question from one of the folks in the live chat. Is Railer asking, does ULA use LOX and RP1 kerosene or something else? Yeah, they use that as a combination on the first stage of the Atlas rocket and a combination of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen on the Centaur upper stage. Good question. Now L minus 1 hour, 30 minutes exactly and counting. We are 1 hour away from the apologies if you hear us pause in commentaries just to listen into mission control, make sure we're providing you with the most up-to-date information. The chill down of the liquid hydrogen lines for the Centaur upper stage is now complete, and they're getting ready to begin flowing LH2 onto the Centaur upper stage. That upper stage will hold about 12,300 gallons of LH2 when all is said and done. ULA uses liquid nitrogen to cool down the engine pumps for the RL-10 upper stage engine, preparing it for flight. Things continue to move nominally in the fueling process of the Atlas V rocket. Again, targeting a liftoff time of 8:47 a.m. Eastern, 12:47 UTC for our viewers around the world. And we hear the call that LOX tank on the Atlas booster stage now stands at 80%. And the liquid hydrogen fueling process that is begun in the last couple of minutes, as you just mentioned, that's the last big outstanding step that had not yet started on the fueling process for the Atlas V rocket. Teams continue to target that liftoff time of 8:47 a.m. So far, launch teams are working no issues, so we are looking good for that liftoff time. Now L minus 1 hour, 23 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Liquid oxygen fueling aboard the Atlas booster continues to move well, now stands at 90%. We've not heard a call out yet for the level of liquid hydrogen on the Centaur upper stage, but do know that they were given the go for that fueling process to begin several minutes ago, more than 10 minutes ago now at this point, so should hear a call out on those levels fairly soon. Now L minus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. Got our first call out on liquid oxygen just moments ago. As you can see with our graphics, stands at about 20% completed fueling. That LH2 tank will hold 12,300 gallons of the cryogenic propellant once it's fully fueled. Things continue to move nominally with the fueling process on the Atlas V rocket. As we get closer to launching, the final mission for the NRO that an Atlas rocket will support before ULA shifts to using its Vulcan rocket. Again, it has 2 certification missions that it needs to complete, the Vulcan does, before it can start flying national security missions. First one coming up later this year, supporting Astrobotic's Peregrine lander as the primary payload, as well as a memorial flight for Celestis called Enterprise that will contain remains of Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, as well as a couple members of the original cast. Now L minus 1 hour, 20 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. Liquid hydrogen on the Centaur upper stage, now at 30%. The other certification flight that Vulcan will fly before it can start doing national security launches is going to be a commercial resupply services mission for a player that we have not seen make a jaunt up to the International Space Station yet. That is Sierra Space with their Dream Chaser space plane cargo spacecraft. Is currently in production right now, the first one. In fact, they just posted a pretty nifty flight profile of that mission. L minus 1 hour, 19 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. Locks at 97.5% full. Continue to step closer to the liftoff of the Atlas rocket. Just about an hour, 20 minutes from now. Got the call out now. LH2 stands at 40%. And ULA describes the fueling of the liquid oxygen on the first stage as complete. They say they are now in top-off mode. Now L minus 1 hour, 19 minutes and counting. Now L minus 1 hour, 18 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Do want to thank the 540 of you that have gotten up early on a Sunday morning for joining us for our live coverage of the Atlas V rocket launching from Space Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station this morning. Fueling continues to move along well. Now LH2 fuel levels at 50%. If you haven't already, if you could give this live stream a like and share the stream, that would be a big help in more people being able to find this coverage this morning, as it is quite early on a Sunday morning. Liquid hydrogen levels on the center upper stage now at 60%. So we now stand at L minus 1 hour, 16 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Now, minus 1 hour, 13 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. The liquid hydrogen levels on the center upper stage now stand at 80%. The center upper stage will be powered by a single RL-10 engine. On the first stage, the Atlas V uses a single two-thrust chamber RD-180 engine on most configurations of the Atlas V, with the exception of the crewed version of the vehicle, which uses two RD-180 engines. As I mentioned before, this is the Atlas 551 configuration, which means it has 5 solid rocket boosters on this particular vehicle. This is the most powerful configuration of an Atlas V supporting today's flight of mission NROL 107. Now L minus 1 hour, 11 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. Liquid hydrogen levels on the center upper stage now at 90%. And liquid oxygen now fully fueled on the Atlas booster. So we are closing in on this rocket being fully fueled as we're just about 1 hour and 11 minutes away from the planned liftoff at 8:47 a.m. Eastern, 12:47 UTC. L minus 1 hour, 10 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. LH2 levels now at 96%. Coming up on L minus 1 hour, 9 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. For those of you who maybe have joined our broadcast a little more recently, got about 600 of you with us live this morning. Welcome to those who are stepping in. I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now, joined alongside Stephen Young for our coverage of the Atlas V launch from United Launch Alliance, supporting the NROL 107 mission for the Silentbarker program. This is a joint mission between the U.S. Space Force as well as the National Reconnaissance Office. Want to make a little bit of a note on one of the graphics you're seeing on our screen, a little bit different than, say, a Falcon 9 launch where you see the T-minus number countdown clock. You see L minus 1 hour, 8 minutes, 55 seconds. That's because there is a planned 30-minute hold still remaining in ULA's countdown. That's coming up at T-minus 4 minutes is when that hold will go into place. So the T-minus countdown clock is T-minus 38 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. So for those of you who are wondering why that's a little bit different than other launches, a little bit of an explanation there. We'll give you another reminder as we get closer to that planned hold coming upon us. As you can see with the propellant gauge on the left-hand side of your screen, fueling continues to move well on the Atlas V rocket, configuration 551. Does have 5 solid rocket boosters. That is the most that an Atlas rocket can bear. Some of you may be wondering, well, why can't an Atlas V rocket have 6 of those GEM 63 solid rocket boosters? ULA President CEO Tori Bruno actually answered that question on his social media, making note of the fact that there's an external liquid oxygen transfer line on the Atlas V rocket that is in the way of adding a 6th solid rocket booster. However, on their forthcoming Vulcan rocket, that line is internal, so if needed, the Vulcan rocket can be outfitted with 6 solid rocket boosters. Now L minus 1 hour, 7 minutes and counting. Now L minus 1 hour, 6 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. Update from ULA. They've got an entirely green board, which means they are currently working no issues from a technical perspective that would limit them from liftoff this morning. So good news for those excited to see an Atlas V launch, our first of the year and first in 10 months from the Space Coast. L minus 1 hour, 4 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. Teams are resuming topping off the LH2 liquid hydrogen on the Centaur upper stage. Bit of a primer here on the Atlas rocket. That Centaur upper stage, about 10 feet in diameter or 3 meters, stands about 41.5 feet tall or 12.6 meters in length. The booster down below, which is in silhouette right now as the sun is rising here on the East Coast. But if you see it in color, it's more of a copper tone. It's about 12.5 feet in diameter, about 3.8 meters, and is 106.5 feet in length, or 32.5 meters. That Atlas booster, depending on its configuration, can support a varying number of those solid rocket boosters. In the 400 series, it can have up to 3. And as we are seeing on this particular configuration, up to 5 on the 500 series of vehicles. Now L minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 17 seconds and counting. Initially, this launch was intended to go off on Tuesday, August 29th. However, with the hurricane on the horizon at that point, making its way towards Florida, Hurricane Idalia, teams decided to stand down from that launch attempt, since it takes about 24 hours to detank a fully fueled Atlas V rocket and roll it back to the vertical integration facility and safely store it. So they decided to stand down from that opportunity, pivot to today. But before that happened, back on the 25th was when the Atlas was rolled out for the first time in anticipation of that original launch time. As that happened with the rollout, we were there with our cameras and able to talk to United Launch Alliance about the mission profile, get a little bit of insight, and we were there right on the ground as it came by us on its way to Space Launch Complex 41. Before I continue, just want to make note, we are exactly 1 hour away from liftoff now. If you're just joining us, I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now, joined alongside Stephen Young. We are preparing for the launch of the rocket you see there on the center of your screen. This is an Atlas V 551 configuration. This is ULA's most powerful version of the Atlas V rocket, sporting 5 solid rocket boosters from Northrop Grumman. The mission on tap today is for the Silentbarker program, a combination of the U.S. Space Force as well as the National Reconnaissance Office. Mission designation NROL 107. This happens to be the 18th and final time an Atlas rocket will be used to support a mission for the NROL, before the Atlas is retired and replaced by the forthcoming Vulcan rocket. When this rocket was getting ready to head to the pad the first time in anticipation of launch, as I was starting to say before we hit the 1 hour mark, we were there for the rollout process and were able to talk to some of the ULA leadership about the mission and the rollout and the importance of this flight. I want to bring you part of our conversation from that day, going back to August 25th, when the Atlas V 551 rolled out for the first time in hopes of launching back in August. Let's take a look at that now. This site,
The team's feeling really good. We're pretty excited.
an Atlas V emerging from United Launch Alliance's vertical integration facility at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, making its way down the railroad tracks towards the launch pad for a new mission.
It's been a while since we launched an Atlas V, so the team's really excited and ready to go for this one.
ULA's Director and General Manager of Launch Operations, Ron Fortson, helped oversee the operations of the roll to the pad in the humid morning hours of August 25th.
The mission requirements for this one, we needed the most powerful one to get it to where it needs to go. And so essentially this is our most powerful vehicle. We have various configurations. This one has the most solids we can put on it, which is 5, and it has a 5-meter failure as well.
Fully fueled, this version of the Atlas V comes in at 1.3 million pounds at liftoff.
And it's over 2.3 million pounds of thrust when it lifts off, so it's a beast.
ULA has flown this configuration of the Atlas V 12 times before. Its first mission was back on January 19, 2006, when it launched NASA's New Horizons spacecraft, a probe from NASA's New Frontiers program, with the initial primary mission of performing a flyby of the Pluto system. Fast forward to today, mission number 13 is much more shrouded in secrecy. It will be launching a mission for the National Reconnaissance Office dubbed NROL 107, aka Silentbarker. The NRO historically doesn't disclose much information about its missions, but did state that this is a joint mission between it and the U.S. Department of Defense Domain Awareness Mission to, quote, meet Department of Defense and intelligence community space protection needs. Fortson himself spent the late 90s working at the NRO and says that this mission carries just a bit more meaning for him.
It's always very satisfying because, so as you said, since I used to work in that organization, I know what capabilities, that are being delivered and what they're going to do for our nation. So to be a part of that and really to help enable those capabilities for the warfighter and the nation, it really just makes me feel really proud to be part of it.
As ULA's teams move the Atlas rocket into position for launch, they're also ticking down the number of times this will happen. The company is only flying 19 more of these rockets before transferring entirely to its Vulcan rocket.
Atlas is going to fly out, but we also have a very bright future with Vulcan ahead. And there's a lot in Vulcan that's taken on a lot of the heritage from Atlas. So a lot of things and improvements that we made on Atlas are going to be incorporated into Vulcan. So the team is really excited about seeing that legacy really kind of transition from the Atlas V vehicle into the Vulcan vehicle.
We want to thank Ron Fortson and folks at ULA for opportunity to have that up-close vantage point for the rollout of the Atlas V rocket. Again, that rollout happened ahead of the initial planned liftoff back on August 29th. That was before they decided it was best to roll the rocket back to the building that you saw over Ron's shoulder there, the Vertical Integration Facility, or the VIF, before Hurricane Idalia came through. They rolled it back out to the pad last week ahead of the launch today. They had been targeting initially a liftoff Saturday morning, September 9th, but they had to stand down for a technical issue that they have worked through, closed out, and right now the range is green from a weather standpoint. The board is green, meaning they're working no technical issues at this time, and things are moving closer to liftoff in 54 minutes, 24 seconds. Now L minus 53 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Do want to thank the more than 800 of you that are joining us for our live coverage of this Atlas V launch this morning. If you haven't already, a great way to help support our coverage here is quick and easy, just by hitting the like button. Does a lot to help with the YouTube algorithm and assist more people in finding our live coverage this morning. So really appreciate if you could do that for us. Be a big help, as well as sharing the stream if you're enjoying the broadcast so far. Looking forward to a launch of the Atlas rocket coming up in just over 50 minutes. The Atlas is now in top-off procedure, keeping all of the propellants at flight levels. As I mentioned, if you happen to miss the package that just ran, it's about 1.3 million pounds for this rocket right now. The cryogenics will continuously be replenished as they get closer to the final minutes of launch, since both liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen has a low boil-off point, so they need to continuously top it off and make sure that the fuel levels stay at the appropriate level for flight. As we previously mentioned as well, this is NROL 107 for the Silentbarker program. Joint operation between the U.S. Space Force and the National Reconnaissance Office. Normally the NRO as an agency doesn't speak a lot about its operations and the payloads that it launches. A lot of them are concerned with national security and intelligence gathering, and so for obvious reasons they like to remain mum about those. However, they did hold a pre-launch press conference where they were forthcoming with not exhaustive details on this mission, but did talk about it in a little more detail than other missions. So want to go to part of the conversation with Dr. Christopher Scalise. He's the director of the National Reconnaissance Office. This is a little bit of an overview of the Silentbarker mission, what it's going to do, as he dubs it. Want to make a quick note. LH2 levels now at 98% on the Centaur upper stage before we go ahead to play that sound from Dr. Scalise. Again, this is the director of the National Reconnaissance Office talking about the Silentbarker mission.
At the NRO, we work to provide the nation and the world's best intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities from space. And this upcoming launch, NRO L107, Silentbarker, is a continuation of that. And it's even more because it indicates a extremely close partnership with our colleagues in the Space Force. Working together, we've developed a system in a relatively short amount of time that's going to provide us with unprecedented coverage of what's going on in the geobelt, so that we can understand the intentions of other countries, to see what they're doing in the geobelt, to see if there's any indications of threats or if it's just normal operations. That capability will just allow us to have increased understanding of what's going on there. So the idea of the mission is to put a satellite in geosynchronous orbit, and then to be looking at that orbital regime and get a sense of what's happening day to day. Satellites do move in geosynchronous orbit. You've heard about communication satellites moving from one location to another to provide better coverage for other areas. Certainly we want to be able to see that so we know what is going on in that area. But we also want to know if there is something going on that is unexpected or shouldn't be going on that could potentially represent a threat to a high value asset, either ours or one of our allies. So that's the purpose of it. It's really to be a watchdog in that orbital regime, in the geosynchronous orbit. And when you think about it, geosynchronous orbit is about 24,000 miles, 40,000 kilometers away from the Earth, so it's pretty hard to see from the ground. So having something that is in that orbit provides us much better coverage, and it will allow Space Force, NRO, and others to have a much better understanding of what's going on in the geosynchronous orbit.
And again, that was Dr. Christopher Scalise, who is the director of the National Reconnaissance Office, talking a little bit about the Silentbarker program launching today. Now, Silentbarker is not just a single launch with a single payload on board the Atlas V rocket. There are multiple payloads, although given the sensitive nature of the mission, the NRO and the Space Force did not disclose how many are on board. There will also be one additional launch that is planned in support of the Silentbarker program. The date for that has also not yet been announced. And the NRO has said there may or may not be multiple payloads on that mission as well. So time will tell if we'll have another briefing and be able to bring you a little more information on that launch. But once both are on orbit and have gone through their checkouts, the full operational capability of the Silentbarker program is expected in fiscal year 2026. Now L-minus 46 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. In addition to our live coverage this morning, if you want to take a moment and read up a little bit more on all things Silentbarker, as well as this particular flight, we do have a couple of articles up on our website, spaceflightnow.com. We're going into a lot more detail about the timeline for development of Silentbarker, as well as what some of the folks behind it have to say about it. Now L-minus 44 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. The fuel fill sequence is now underway. It's the process of releasing some of the RP-1 or the rocket-grade kerosene into the RD-180 main engine on the Atlas booster in preparation for ignition. That is now underway. Also of note, as we're a few minutes into the 8 o'clock hour here on the East Coast, a little bit after 1200 UTC, ULA's President Tory Bruno noting at this point everything is good to go from a technical standpoint. He says they are working no issues at this time, which is good news for teams that are working toward the launch of this Atlas V rocket you see there at the center of your screen. Now at L minus 42 minutes and counting. For those of you that have joined us more recently and do have more than 1,000 of you now with us this morning, first of all, thank you for being with us for the launch of the Atlas V rocket. Coming up now in just over 40 minutes. Do want to note for those of you who have noticed the countdown clock is an L minus as opposed to a T minus. That's because there is a 30-minute planned hold that's coming up at T-minus 4 minutes. The T-minus countdown clock stands at 11 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. Again, that T-minus clock will freeze for the planned 30-minute hold. Once it hits the 4-minute mark, you'll see the L-minus countdown clock continue on. That is our countdown to launch. Still targeting a liftoff time of 8:47 a.m. Eastern, 12:47 UTC. Now T-minus 10 minutes. We are about 6 minutes away from the start of the planned 30-minute hold. This is the second 30-minute hold that ULA has built into the countdown for today's Atlas V procedure. The first one came up at T-minus 120 minutes, or T-minus 2 hours. That was in preparation for the start of propellant load early this morning. Obviously, that has come and gone, and we now have one 30-minute hold left on the countdown procedure. Now L minus 36 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. We're now 2 minutes away from the start of the 30-minute planned hold. Again, that's when the T minus countdown clock will freeze at T minus 4 minutes for 30 minutes. This is the final planned hold left in the countdown procedure ahead of the launch of this Atlas V rocket. You're taking a look at that T-minus countdown clock now live on your screen. In just over a minute, you'll see it freeze at 4 minutes. Again, that is planned. This is a planned 30-minute hold that will start in 1 minute. And we're hearing good call-outs that the propellant tank levels are all at flight level so far. Get another good indication that we are moving towards that planned liftoff time coming up at 8:47. And we're 10 seconds away from the start of the 30-minute planned hold. We see that countdown clock freeze in 3, 2, 1. Now in the 30-minute planned hold. Again, this is the second of 2 planned 30-minute holds. Gives ULA a little bit of extra margin as they get ready for their terminal count. As ULA says, during this pause period, they will do their final readiness polls of the launch team and the management teams. All things remain on schedule for an on-time liftoff at 8:47 a.m. Eastern. That is 12:47 UTC for the NROL 107 mission for the Silentbarker program. Switch now back to our L- countdown clock. This is the actual countdown time, so we can all keep better track and you're not trying to calculate, okay, well, he said went to the 4-minute hold at this time, and we don't want you to have to do math. It's too early on a Sunday for that. So we put back the liftoff countdown time so we can all have a good visual gauge of that coming up in 32 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Now L minus 29 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. Want to thank United Nations Space Command for your $5 super chat donation. Really appreciate the support for our coverage this morning. Do have an update on the weather. Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik says the forecast is go for launch from a weather standpoint less than 30 minutes from now. So weather, as you can see, remains very much not an obstacle for today's liftoff of the Atlas V rocket for a planned departure from Slick 41 at 8:47 a.m. Eastern this morning. Team also working no technical issues on the Atlas V rocket. So from a technical perspective, things are moving along well also. Also, to address the super chat from United Nations Space Command, asking us to run to the control room and hit the launch button, please. Were we to have that power, that would be, well, honestly, too much power for us. But rest assured, things are moving toward a good liftoff time, just 27 minutes, 35 seconds from now. So we are very close. We are on track for that liftoff time. So be sure to stick with us as we get ready to head to that point in the liftoff. First Atlas launch of the year, second launch of the year for ULA. They did have a Delta IV Heavy rocket that also launched an NRO mission earlier this year. That was a nighttime launch. Nice to see a rocket lift off from the Space Coast in daylight. It's been, by our estimation, 14 missions in a row from the Space Coast since our last daytime launch. That was when SpaceX launched the Euclid mission for NASA, or for the European Space Agency, excuse me. That liftoff, now 26 minutes, 30 seconds away from now. Now L minus 25 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Now have a little more than 1,700 folks that are joining us live on this fine Sunday morning. I want to thank you all for being with us today. If you'd like to help support our coverage, there's a quick and easy way to do that. If you could just hit the like button, it'd be a big help. want to note, as is typically the case with Atlas launches, this one also dedicated to someone who is passed. This one is dedicated to Albert Alvarez, who served in the U.S. Navy. His name is emblazoned on the Atlas V's payload fairings on the opposite side from the mission patch. Now L minus 21 minutes and counting. Call out that the liquid oxygen or the LOX on the Centaur upper stage now at flight level. Things continue to move nominally or smoothly as we get closer to the liftoff of the Atlas V rocket from Space Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, coming up in just over 20 minutes. Now L minus 17 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. Taking a look at the Atlas V rocket there. These views being provided by Chuck Briggs, so appreciate Chuck for helping us out with our live coverage today. As you can see, some venting there from the Atlas as teams continue to top off both propellants on the Centaur upper stage as well as the Atlas booster, preparing for a liftoff at 8:47 a.m. Eastern, 12:47 UTC, coming up supporting the Silentbarker program, mission designation NROL 107. So you see there on the bottom of your screen, as we've talked about earlier in the broadcast, there are 5 solid rocket boosters on the bottom of that Atlas booster. This is the most that an Atlas rocket can support, since there is an external liquid oxygen transfer line that is on the outside of the Atlas booster that prevents it from having a 6th booster SRB on there. Now L minus 14 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. As we get closer to the liftoff of this Atlas V rocket, who better to hear from than the president and CEO of United Launch Alliance, Tori Bruno, talking about the mission profile for today's launch. Again, sending up the 551 configuration of the Atlas V rocket. This is the most powerful version of the Atlas, since it has 5 solid rocket boosters on it. So let's hear from Tori Bruno. We spoke with him in the run-up to the initial launch attempt, which was set back on August 29th. This is Tori Bruno for United Launch Alliance.
This is an important area for us. For me personally, I care a great deal about what we do, and I'm just honored to be up here with you guys. The launch is going to be cool. This is our bruiser configuration of the Atlas. That means it's got 5 solid rocket motors on it. When you hear 4, 3, 2, 1 ignition, do not blink, because it will leap off the pad. We'll be pulling more than a G before we clear the top of that tower. About a minute and a half in, we're going to have fully expended 500,000 pounds of the solid propellant. We're going to drop those solids off. At 3.5 minutes, we'll have crossed the Kármán line with the first stage and be all the way into space. We'll let go of the payload fairing at that point, and a minute later, we will actually be entering the LEO regime on the booster at over 20,000 miles per hour. We'll hand it off to the Centaur. It will conduct a whole series of very complex orbital maneuvers to put this payload directly injected into a high-energy orbit. My rocket scientists love this mission because it is what Atlas was designed to do, and no other rocket does it better. And personally, this mission, it means a lot to me, as it does to everyone on your teams, I'm sure. There are folks out there working very hard every day to make Earth orbit a rough neighborhood, and this is going to do a lot to keep it the safe high ground, peaceful high ground that it is meant to be.
Now L minus 12 minutes to the liftoff of the Atlas V rocket. Our thanks again to United Launch Alliance and Tori Bruno for speaking with us about the launch of the Atlas V rocket in its 551 configuration. This is the first mission supporting the Silentbarker program. It's a joint mission between the U.S. Space Force as well as the National Reconnaissance Office. Described as a watchdog of sorts, this satellite will go to geosynchronous orbit and give the NRO essentially eyes in that space to be able to track objects that are in that space. Geosynchronous orbit, or GEO as it's shorthand referred to, is about 24,000 to 40,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. At present, U.S. Space Systems Command uses ground systems to be able to track objects in that space. They can see and track objects that are about the size of a basketball at present, but being able to have on-orbit capabilities like the Silentbarker program satellite will allow them to do so from the geospace itself. An important capability that both the U.S. Space Force as well as the NRO both wanted to have. Taking a look now, this is ULA's feed. As mentioned, the dedication to this mission on behalf of a couple of people that were part of the ULA team, as well as the Navy's Captain Alberto Al Perez. Taking a look now again from United Launch Alliance of the Atlas V rocket there, as we are 10 minutes away from its launch. The building that you see on the right-hand side of your screen there, that is the VIF, otherwise known as the Vertical Integration Facility. That's where United Launch Alliance stacks the rocket. Now, minus 48 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. Coming up on the L minus 7 minute readiness pull. Teams have been going through the procedures for a hold if necessary. They'll call out hold, hold, hold on the comms loop. Quickly state the reason why, if that is in fact needed. But so far, United Launch Alliance working no issues. The weather remains good for launch. Upper level winds are within flight constraints, and we are moving forward at this point in time with a launch in just over 8 minutes. Want to thank the 4,100 of you that are joining us live. If you just happen to be popping in with us in the final minutes of the count, I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now, joined alongside Stephen Young. Look forward to bringing you live coverage as we continue that live coverage of the launch of the Atlas V rocket for United Launch Alliance, supporting the Silentbarker program mission, designated NROL 107. This is ULA's first Atlas launch of the year, first in 10 months, as a matter of fact. Teams are working no issues either from a weather perspective or from a technical perspective on the Atlas V rocket. Propellant has been fully loaded onto the Atlas for some time now. We're getting ready to exit the planned hold in just a moment, but they are about to conduct their
Status
L-7
check.
minute
Proceed
poll
with terminal
now.
count. Atlas systems. Propulsion.
Go.
Hydraulics.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
LO2. Go. Water. Go. Centaur systems. Propulsion. Go. Pneumatics. Go. LO2. Go. LH2.
Go.
S-gas. Go. Electrical systems. Airborne.
Go.
Ground. Go. Facility. Go. RFFTS.
Go.
Flight control.
Go.
GCQ.
Go.
Op support.
Go.
Comm. Go. Umbilicals.
Go.
ECS. Go. Redline monitor. Go. Quality.
Go.
Op safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Launch director.
Launch vehicle is ready to launch.
Mission director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. ALC, verify T0 is set for 1247 Zulu.
Verified.
And as you just heard the conclusion of the poll, we are go for launch from all of the systems team members. Now coming up in 5 minutes, 41 seconds and counting. Now less than 5.5 minutes away from the launch of the Atlas rocket. Taking a look inside the control center there. This is you see a couple of varying views of the Atlas V rocket there at the pad. Hear that call out, we're getting ready to step out of the hold at T-minus 4 minutes and 15 seconds from now. We see that countdown clock. See there on your screen, it'll pick up now coming up in the next 5 seconds. Now in that terminal count for the last few minutes of the Atlas V countdown procedure, getting ready for a liftoff in just over 3.5 minutes from now. As we enter this final terminal count, again, want to thank all of you who have joined us for our live coverage this morning. Have a little over 6,000 of you who have gotten up early on a Sunday morning to see an Atlas rocket take to the skies. Do want to make one last ask for, if you could hit the like button on this video, it would help even more people be able to find our coverage as we enter in the last few minutes of the terminal count. As you know, this is, of course, the most exciting point, getting ready for a launch. So if we can help bring more people into the moment, that would be fantastic. Now, less than 2 minutes left. Coming up on the last 1 minute 30 seconds in this count. Coming up on the final minute of the count. Coming into the last 30 seconds of the count. Now just over 10 seconds left in the count. 8. 7. Engine ignition. 6. Max Q, the point of greatest dynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now 3 minutes into flight, all moving well. As you can see, those payload fairings falling away from the Atlas rocket. Gotcha. Now T plus 5 minutes, 14 seconds into the Silentbarker mission. Had a good liftoff, payload fairing separation, and the Centaur upper stage is continuing on its burn, getting ready to deploy the Silentbarker payload. Because it is a national security mission, they are not providing onboard cameras and have discontinued their commentary as well as mission audio loops that are going out. So going ahead and wrap up our live coverage this morning. Let's take one last look at the launch pad Slick 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This pad won't be quiet for as long as it has before this launch, though. ULA preparing to launch another Atlas V rocket in support of Amazon's Project Kuiper constellation, the first two prototype satellites, which were originally going to fly aboard a Vulcan rocket on its maiden flight. Because of the delay of that rocket, have now been switched to one of the multiple Atlas V launches that Amazon purchased. And so that launch was originally set for August 26th, but that was assuming the launch of this mission back on August 29th. So ULA has not yet stated when the new liftoff of those Project Kuiper satellites are going to be, but we'll, of course, keep tabs on that. Stick to our website, spaceflightnow.com. We have a launch schedule of missions coming up, so we will let you know as soon as we do have confirmation of when that Atlas V is going to launch. You can still see evidence hanging in the air. Those are not natural clouds. This is the remnants of the Atlas V rocket that took to the skies 7 minutes, 21 seconds ago. A gorgeous daylight launch, something we have not seen in quite some time since back on July 1st when SpaceX launched the Euclid mission for the European Space Agency. Had 14 in a row in the overnight hours. So nice to see a rocket hit the daylight here from the Space Coast. Again, I want to thank all of you for being with us for our live coverage of this Atlas launch, an exciting one and in the 551 configuration. Those solid rocket boosters really helped this thing lift off the pad most expeditiously. Again, that next Atlas launch coming up potentially later this month or early October. It's going to be a busy fall from the Space Coast since October 5th. The pad over at Launch Complex 39A will also be in use. You'll see a Falcon Heavy rocket supporting NASA's Psyche mission getting ready to launch no earlier than October 5th. And SpaceX has been launching on average about every 4 days or so. So we are expecting another SpaceX launch, another Falcon 9 from Pad 40 coming up in the next several days. Of course, we'll bring you live coverage of that as it happens as well. Busy time in the space launch sphere, so we really appreciate all of your support for our coverage both here on YouTube as well as on our website. Thank you to all of our channel members and those of you who offer Super Chat donations helping support our live coverage. We enjoy bringing these missions to you as they happen, and your support with Super Chat membership as well as just hitting that like button is a big help in bringing this to you. So for Stephen Young, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Thank you so much for being with us. If you'd like to continue seeing live views of the pads here, as well as over at Starbase in Texas, you can continue seeing that live over on our Launchpad live stream, always up on our YouTube channel for you. Keep eyes on what's going on in Spaceflight. Looking forward to bringing those next missions to you. So for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Thank you for being with us on a Sunday morning. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will see you next time.